From evil poachers who got what they deserved to careless performers attacked by their pet props, here are 10 times animals got their revenge on humans. Gorilla attack. Gorillas do not appreciate being messed with in the wild by tourists, and one gorilla got his revenge by scaring the life out of a group of tourists while they were trekking in Rwanda. This was even captured on film. The tourists thought it would be fun to stroll into the jungle and get a few photos of some wild gorillas, but the oversized apes didn't feel so great about it. One big mean gorilla rampaged at 2 of the tourists and their guide, throwing 3 of them to the ground with one muscly arm. If not for the intervention and quick thinking of the guide, the gorilla very well could have beaten the tourists beyond recognition. The tourists were so shocked and terrified that they basically cowered on the ground in fear as the gorilla terrorized them. But in the end, everyone was okay. The tourists got quite a scare, but they left with their lives. They will probably think twice before going into the wild to bother some gorillas again. In Rwanda, gorilla tourism is actually big business. There are around 1,000 of the animals in the region where this incident took place. A fully grown male gorilla can weigh around 420 pounds. Elephant crushes hunter. Talk about instant karma. In this story reported by the New York Post, a big game hunter is killed when a shot elephant lands directly on top of him. You might say he was beaten by his own game. This was a South African big game hunter, a 51-year-old man who was leading a hunt in Zimbabwe when him and his group walked into the path of a herd of elephants. 3 of the elephants charged, as elephants do when threatened. The big game hunter fired at the animals and was then caught off guard by a surprise attack from the side. A 4th elephant picked him up with her trunk. One of the other hunters shot the animal in his defense, and the animal fell over onto the hunter, killing him pretty much instantly. This is actually kind of sad, as the man leaves behind a wife and 5 children. However, that's kind of what happens when you mess with elephants. It's reported that he made his money by taking wealthy Americans out into the wild to shoot trophy animals, and this is just the kind of thing that happens. His specialty was actually hunting leopards and lions, so it's a little ironic that it was ultimately an elephant that crushed him to death. What do you think? Did he deserve it or not? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Lions maul poachers. Our next story is another instance of karma, but in this one, an alleged rhino poacher is mauled to death by lions in South Africa. Actually, this didn't happen to one poacher, it happened to a whole group of poachers. This went down as they were supposedly trespassing in an African game reserve, according to the owner of the reserve. It's a place dedicated for camping and safaris for tourists. Apparently, the poachers snuck into the site with the intent of poaching some rhinoceroses. Some of the employees at the park were alerted at around 4:30 in the morning when the lions were making quite a bit of noise. However, it was not until the next day when the anti-poaching unit came across the remains of the poachers. There, the authorities also found a rifle, gloves, wire cutters, and a backpack with food. All the supplies were there that would be needed for killing a rhino and taking its horn. According to the authorities, the group of would-be poachers walked right into a group of 6 lions completely by accident and never made it back out. Since 2007, the poaching of rhinoceroses is up over 8,000%, as reported by ABC News. You'd think that as the animals near extinction and global condemnation over hunting increases, it would stop, but it's actually gotten worse. Tiger attacks circus trainer. You have to be a certain type of person to be a circus trainer, especially one that basically terrorizes a tiger all day for the entertainment of a bunch of hillbillies who come to watch. Back in 2016, a tiger finally got its revenge when it attacked its trainer. This happened at the Pensacola Interstate Fair when the animal finally had enough and struck back. The incident was caught on video, and it shows the circus trainer beating the animal in the face and striking it with a whip. And as the tiger became more and more panicked, it got more and more angry. The tiger then snatched up its trainer in its giant jaws and dragged him around in the cage. The tiger did eventually let go as another circus trainer stepped in to rescue his friend, but at least the guy finally got a little taste of his own medicine. Obviously, this is violating so many United States regulations, including the Animal Welfare Act. The fact that these types of circuses still exist is absolutely ridiculous, and the fact that people are actually paying money to go and watch somebody torture a tiger is kind of sick. But in the end, the tiger got its little taste of revenge. The unfortunate thing is that it probably won't be getting any more revenge after this incident. Indonesian singer killed by cobra. Here is another story about a performer being attacked by a very dangerous animal. An Indonesian singer famous for performing with live and deadly snakes finally performed her last song when the king cobra she had on stage took a bite out of her. You might say the king cobra was sick and tired of working for nothing. It took its deadly revenge on its owner and probably didn't think too much of it. The performer's name was Irma Bule, and if you live in the English world you probably have no idea who she was, but she was super famous in the Southeast Asian scene. She was only 29 when the snake chomped down, and in Indonesia it's apparently not illegal to perform with deadly animals on stage, and the performer used it as a gimmick to pick up more and more fans. But in 2016, in the middle of her second song of the night, Irma stepped on the snake's tail, and according to the local Indonesian news outlet, the snake bit her immediately right on the thigh. A bite from a king cobra is basically guaranteed death. These snakes grow to be around 18 feet long and are incredibly venomous. The amount of neurotoxin delivered in a single bite is enough to kill 20 people, and that's exactly what happened to Irma Bule. She did have anti-venom on hand, but apparently she kept on singing for 45 minutes after being bitten. This is because she didn't even notice she had been bit. Then the effect of the bite took hold. She vomited, had a seizure, and died. Elephant revenge attacks. Elephant revenge is nothing new. Elephants are smart, they have complicated social structures, and they appreciate a good revenge attack. Because elephants never forget, they have a particular thirst for vengeance unlike any other animal. Not only do elephants never forget, but they never forgive either. As reported by the Daily Mail, when an elephant was struck by a passenger train, the grieving herd then went out on a rampage and attacked some villages nearby to where their friend was hit by the train. This happened in India back in 2013 near the small village of Matari. The elephant was struck by the Kolkata-Delhi Express and died. The next night, the elephants tried to return to the spot near the railway where their friend was killed, but the local villagers kept them back by attacking them with firecrackers and making loud noises. But the night after that, the elephants hit back hard on another village where they damaged a whole bunch of houses and tried to destroy everything they could find. In the end, a specialist squad had to be sent in, and they were able to drive the herd out of the area before they could kill anybody. But at least the elephants got a little bit of revenge. Poacher eaten by lions. We talked about a gang of poachers being mauled to death by lions, and now we have another very similar story, but it has a unique twist. As reported by CNN, a rhino poacher in 2019 was killed by an elephant in Kruger National Park in South Africa, then later eaten by lions. The only thing left of him when authorities arrived was a skull and a pair of trousers. The incident allegedly happened after the man entered the park with 4 other people intent on poaching a rhino. Then an elephant suddenly attacked the poacher, killed him, and drove off the rest of the poachers. While this is a pretty good story of an elephant defending all the animals in the park, what happened after is actually pretty grisly. The man's family were notified of his death, and then a search party was sent out to try and find his body, but none of the rangers could find it. It wasn't until much later that they found just a handful of his remains. The authorities believe a pride of lions found the body and did what lions do best. And that's what some might call the circle of life. Wounded elk gets revenge. In Oregon, a wounded elk ended its life with the bittersweet taste of revenge. This happened in Tillamook County after an elk was shot and wounded with an arrow. A 66-year-old man had been archery hunting in the evening when his arrow hit the bull elk and wounded it, but because it was so late, the archer couldn't find the elk to finish it off. It wasn't until the next morning that he went to look for the elk. He found it at around 9 o'clock and tried to finish it off with his bow. But alas, he was too slow. The elk literally gored him with its antlers, and the man died shortly after from his injuries. The elk also died later that day, and according to an Oregon news source, its meat was donated to the local county jail. Dogs ruin car. This is probably the best story on the list, and I should start it from the beginning. First of all, the story comes to us from China. A man kicked a dog because it was sitting in his usual spot when he pulled his car into his building's parking lot. To get the dog out of the way, the man gave it a swift kick. When he returned the next morning, the man found that his car had been absolutely ruined. There were bite marks all over it, along with lots of scratches and other artificial damage. The driver of the car only discovered what happened after he found out that his neighbor had captured the attack on camera. You can see in the photos that the dog came back later with his friends and they had a free-for-all on the guy's car. This goes to show that dogs remember and they also take revenge. It also shows that you should never trust your neighbor who sits there taking pictures of wild dogs while they rip apart your car rather than getting out and shooing them away. wild boar seeks revenge. Wild boars may look kind of harmless. They're basically just shaggy pigs. However, wild boars have a mean streak. A story from 2015 takes us back to when a hunter bled to death after a wild boar got its revenge in the north of Spain. The local police called it an unfortunate accident, but there's no denying what it really was: pure cold-blooded revenge. It all happened after the hunter shot the boar rather than walking down to the grocery store and just buying some food. After he shot the animal, the hunting dogs went in to surround it, and as the man got close to finish the job, the boar charged and gored him right in the leg. This is kinda like what happened with the man and the elk in the other story. And much like that same incident, this man died from blood loss. He was taken by helicopter to the nearest hospital, but did not make it. And sadly, neither did the boar. Which animal revenge attack do you think was the most warranted? From mermaids spotted in World War II, plus an African construction site put on hold due to mermaid attacks, here are 10 of the most legit mermaid sightings and stories. 1943 Key Islands mermaid. Starting our wild mermaid tales today is the 1943 incident in which Japanese soldiers allegedly spotted a mermaid in the middle of World War II. This happened at the Key Islands in Indonesia, a place with white sand beaches and gorgeous scenery. The Japanese soldiers were stationed with a surveillance team on a small island in the region when they supposedly saw strange creatures in the water that had the limbs and faces of a human, but the features of a carp. The Japanese soldiers also claimed that the creatures had pink skin and spines that stuck out of their heads. But unlike traditional mermaids, these beings did not have fishtails. By the way that the Japanese described it, it sounded like they saw the thing from the Black Lagoon. So were they beautiful mermaids or disturbing sea monsters? It's unclear, but the truth must be out there somewhere. It's possible that they were strange fish covered in coral or barnacles, maybe even a narwhal. Scientists never really found out the real answers. Apparently, soldiers would see these weird creatures cavorting near beaches and lagoons mostly in the night. They also witnessed them on the beaches at dusk, but the supposed mermaids would then quickly sprint into the water and dive below the waves when spotted. So far as the story goes, even the local villagers knew all about the human fish creatures. They called them orang-ikan. But whether these freaky fishermen were real or not is anyone's guess. Israeli mermaids. As recently as 2009, mermaids have been spotted in Israel, in specifics, the small beach town of Kiryat Yam. According to Live Science, people reported seeing a mermaid at dusk, and the mermaid would perform tricks for locals and tourists. This mermaid was supposedly a young woman with the bottom half of a fish. She was first spotted sunbathing, but when she got caught, the mermaid leapt to her feet and disappeared into the ocean. And while you might think this is just total nonsense, the sighting was not isolated. Hundreds of people came forward in Kiryat Yam claiming that they too saw the mermaid. The mermaid became so popular that the town council offered a $1 million reward for any evidence that the creature really did exist. It should not come as a surprise to you that as of now, over 10 years later, nobody has yet to earn that $1 million. What happened in 2009 was probably a bunch of crazy stories feeding off of other crazy stories and people getting way too excited. What's the most striking example you have ever witnessed of someone making up a rumor and getting others to believe it? Was it gossip in grade school? Was it a religious cult or some so-called mystic or shaman? Let me know what happened and whether or not you believed it. Then remember, if you liked this video, you should definitely subscribe to keep up with all the great videos here on Talltanic. Canadian mermaid. Our next story takes us to Canada, to June 1967, British Columbia. This was the month that a mermaid was apparently spotted hanging out on the shore of Main Island. A whole group of people on a ferry claimed that they witnessed a blonde woman sitting on the shore. She was topless, gorgeous, had long blonde hair, and the tail of a porpoise. Apparently, she was even snacking on some raw salmon. Unlike most sightings, this one happened in a group, and someone even managed to take a picture. Is the picture legit? It depends who you ask. Many would claim it's a total fabrication or an outright hoax, but some people would call it real evidence. The mermaid was seen again a week later, and after the locals got excited. Just like with the reward for $1 million in Israel from 2009, the local town newspaper put out a $25,000 reward for anyone who could catch the mermaid. There were arrangements made for the mermaid to have a place to stay when she was found, and the townsfolk promised to make her feel very much at home. But she clearly did not hear them because she never showed up. Of course, the whole thing was probably nonsense, but that has not stopped some of the people who still live in the small Canadian region from claiming mermaids live in their waters. Mermaids halt construction. In 2012, workers in Zimbabwe were scared away from their construction site because of an angry mermaid. This happened while workers were trying to complete the construction of 2 dams. According to the ridiculous story from the Daily Mail, the mermaid legitimately harassed workers while they tried to complete their duties. In Zimbabwe, mermaids are known as Mamba Muntu, and since the local workers grew up on folklore and mythology, they wholeheartedly believed the appearance of the mermaid was a horrible omen and that the dam should not be finished. In a completely unbelievable reaction, the local council hired white workers to continue building the dam so that they wouldn't be scared away by a supposed mermaid. But much to everyone's surprise, the white workers also left the construction site and vowed never to return because the river mermaid was being so incredibly rude to them. The local council members ended up needing to perform a special ritual to cleanse the development of the dam and appease the mermaid. So what do you think? Was there really an angry mermaid wreaking havoc on the workers, or was it all just superstition and paranoia? This seems like a bizarre instance of some strange people quarreling and scaring away the workers, but multiple teams of employees walked off the job. The whole thing is totally strange and bewildering. Mermaids can be black. Believe it or not, mermaids can be black too. We often see mermaids depicted as white-skinned with colorful hair. I'm thinking of the famous lead character, Ariel, from Disney's Little Mermaid movie. She is an iconic mermaid and likely helped shape people's perceptions of what mermaids look like. But in most folklore, this isn't actually the case. Remember the huge issue back in 2019 after Disney announced that they would have Halle Berry play Ariel in a live-action remake of The Little Mermaid? If you don't remember, there was a huge racially charged uproar about it. But the truth is that there are mermaids in a lot of different cultures, and guess what? Most of them are not white. There are water elementals from Africa, beings that are half serpent and half human. There is also the deity Orisha from West Africa, who is often depicted as being a mermaid. The Aboriginal people in Australia have stories of mermaids, none of which are very white, and even in India there are half serpent, half human creatures that look a whole lot like mermaids. Don't forget the stories and folklore from the Caribbean, from Chinese mythology, and from Japan. There are stories about mermaids from almost everywhere on Earth, and the truth is that most of them have pretty dark skin. So think about that the next time you're trying to imagine what a mermaid would look like. The truth might surprise you because mermaids are as diverse as human beings. Plus, they have fishtails, so it's hard to focus on something as superficial as the color of their skin, right? The South African Caiman. In South Africa, there is a legendary mermaid creature known as the Caiman, and in 2008 it was making big waves in local news. It all went down when a group of friends camping near a river heard a loud splash followed by some banging. After a bit of investigation, the group apparently found a woman in the river. She was pale white, had long black hair, and kind of looked to be glowing, but she also had piercing red eyes. The mermaid creature cried out, then vanished into the river. Of course, this could have just been one big group hallucination, then again, it could have been real. Some people in South Africa are extremely afraid of the legendary Caiman. She is known for pulling people under the water and trapping them there forever. I suspect that the truth is that this monster is a combination of stories of sea serpents, hippopotamus, and maybe even crazy loners who live in the river and scare people off with threatening nighttime activities. A real mermaid is hard to believe. The Scottish Mermaid. Scotland has a long history of monsters, legends, and mysteries. They also have a lot of mermaids in their folklore. There is a story from the 1800s in which a mermaid was apparently killed by some people out in the Hebrides. It all started when a woman found a mermaid while cutting seaweed near the shore. The woman screamed for help, and a bunch of people from nearby rushed into the water after the mermaid. One of them threw a stone at the mermaid, then she disappeared under the water, but a few days later the mermaid corpse supposedly washed up on shore. The mermaid was small, pale, and had the tail of a fish, but without any scales. The story continues with the sheriff giving the mermaid a proper burial, but the grave of this mermaid has yet to be found in modern times. Some say that the grave washed out to shore, and others think it's just a silly legend. Still, there is the slimmest chance that a grave from somewhere between 1820 and 1830 is hidden somewhere on the island. The person who finds it would instantly become world famous, that's for sure. It might be worth searching around that part of Scotland to try to find the truth if treasure hunting is your passion. Mermaid bones. In 2014, there was an apparent skeleton found on the east coast of South Island in New Zealand of a legendary mermaid. It was allegedly found by a crew of fishermen from Papua New Guinea. 7 fishermen thought they saw a female corpse in the sand from their boat, and they alerted the New Zealand Coast Guard. The Coast Guard got some help by the federal police since they thought they were going to find a dead body. But after the authorities went to the location, they found the skeletal remains of something that was definitely not a human. It looked like a mermaid. Apparently, the authorities actually tried to get some assistance from forensic experts from the University of Auckland to identify the remains that they found. Obviously, the legitimate discovery of a humanoid sea creature would flip the world on its head, but as of yet, there has been no official confirmation, and in fact, the whole story could just be a great big hoax. On the other hand, the authorities could have taken the remains of the mermaid and someone or something made it disappear before the story could be verified. The Orkney Mermaid. Our next story comes again from Scotland, this time from Newark Bay in the late 1800s. There were multiple mermaid sightings in the year 1890, and the legend of the Deerness mermaid was born. This particular mermaid was not very good looking. The people who came forward claiming that they saw her described a humanoid creature at least 7 feet, 2 meters tall, with pale skin and black hair. She apparently crawled onto rocks using her arms, then would slide down into the waves with her fishtail. Of course, all the witnesses saw her from a great distance, so it very well could have just been a very tall woman swimming in the ocean. What's really interesting about this story is that all the witnesses reported seeing her only around 1890. In the following years, there were no sightings at all. It seemed like the mermaid vanished back into the murky depths, never to return. Could it have just been a curious swimmer? Could it have been an oddly human-looking whale? Or was it indeed a mermaid just coming up to say hello? Manatee or mermaid? This is probably the most ridiculous story on the list. The fact that anyone would confuse a mermaid with a manatee or the other way around is purely ridiculous, yet all the same time, sailors used to apparently mistake fat, happy manatees for legendary mermaids. The place where this happened the most, unsurprisingly, was off the coast of Florida. The legends say that when the ancient mariners were first sailing those waters and exploring the Caribbean, they would see manatees near the surface of the water and assume that they were mystical mermaids. The flipper might make a bit of sense. If you only saw the bottom half of the manatee, you might think it was a fat, gray-colored mermaid, but it is still pretty ridiculous. The most nonsensical example is Christopher Columbus, who, according to History.com, wrote in his ship's log back in 1493 that he encountered 3 mermaids in the water around the island of Hispaniola. He was apparently upset that the mermaids that he saw were not as beautiful as the stories he had heard. Columbus thought the mermaids were in fact ugly and way too masculine. And that makes sense considering they weren't mermaids at all and were probably sea cows. Christopher Columbus was obviously not the brightest bulb in the box. Do you believe in mermaids? From a misplaced porpoise to a dead mermaid, and even a real-life sharknado unlike anything you've ever seen, here are 10 strange sea creatures discovered after tsunamis. The blue jellyfish. Jellyfish being blue isn't that big of a surprise. However, a blue button jellyfish turning up on the shores of New Jersey is quite the event. This particular jellyfish was discovered by a woman while she walked along the shore with her young son and 2 dogs. She spotted the odd jellyfish right away sitting in the sand near the water, and it was unlike any jellyfish that she had ever seen before. The blue button jellyfish is so blue it's almost unreal. In this instance, the jellyfish wasn't alone either. There were several of them all clustered together. According to a marine biologist and expert on jellyfish, this unique animal does not belong anywhere near New Jersey. Blue button jellyfish live down near Florida and in the tropics. She believes the weird creatures were likely pushed all the way to New Jersey after Hurricane Florence disturbed the waters. This is just another case of extreme weather pushing sea creatures far away from home all the way to distant shores. Alien fish. Imagine walking down the beach and finding that an alien had washed up on shore. That's exactly what happened to a resident of New Zealand back in 2018. Just minding their business and suddenly they discovered this bizarre creature. It was a skeleton with claws and what appeared to be wings. It also appeared to have very sharp fangs in its mouth. To make things even stranger, the alien fish was discovered after a large storm just passed by, and it was discovered in a very strange part of the beach, a part that's really rocky and has a large drop off to the shore. That means it would have been impossible for the creature to swim to the point where it was found. In all likelihood, it was the storm that tossed it onto the beach, but the even stranger part is that nobody was really sure what the creature was at first. It was a complete mystery until a doctor identified the photo online as being a New Zealand rough skate, which is basically a flat shark with a skeleton made out of cartilage. These weird fish are often caught by commercial fishermen who then sell their wings to be eaten. And even though the creature looks like it has legs, it actually does not. What appear to be legs are actually claspers, which the fish uses for mating with a female. Out of all the creatures that have washed up on shore after a tsunami or a big storm, this is one of the strangest. Mystery dead thing. In Indonesia, a giant 50-foot blob washed up on shore in 2017 and nobody even knew what it was. This happened in Hulong Beach, and there's no denying that whatever the blob was, it was enormous. It was also very dead when it was found. The thing was just sitting near the shore in the water, which had turned red by the way, rotting away in a big slop of tissue and meat. Not only was the mystery creature extremely long, but it was also estimated to weigh at least 35 tons. That would make it over 4 times heavier than a standard elephant. What do you think it was? Let me know in the comments below. Locals initially identified the strange creature as a giant squid. However, an employee of the local Natural History Museum said that there are no records of giant squids anywhere near Indonesia. This means that it could have been a whale in an advanced state of decomposition, but it was so horribly decayed that nobody really knew for sure. Unfortunately, the creature decayed too fast and nobody was overly interested, and so it ended up being a mystery that was never solved. Whether the creature washed up after a storm out at sea or because of one of the many tsunamis constantly hitting Indonesia, it's really anyone's guess. Attack of the Blobs. In 2016, California was under siege by an army of strange sea critters. This happened when thousands of weird pink blobs started showing up on Huntington Beach. According to the local reports, they were very squishy and kind of looked like giant fish eggs. They were basically gelatinous pods and nobody knew where they came from, and truth be told, they looked pretty disgusting. They almost looked like water balloons filled with plasma, like weird deformed jellyfish. An expert from the University of California, Irvine, finally came forward after photos of the blobs surfaced online and claimed that they were probably sea cucumbers. They were likely already on Huntington Beach, only hiding under the sand. But after a recent storm in the area shifted the sand and exposed the creatures, it seemed that they had washed up out of nowhere. Within just a few days, locals reported that the sea cucumbers had disappeared entirely. Another professor from the University of California, Irvine, later confirmed the creatures were indeed sea cucumbers and that they had indeed been under the sand the entire time, right under everyone's feet. Sea cucumbers are weird marine animals typically found on the bottom of the sea floor. An alien dock. The biggest displacement of sea life in recent memory happened after the destructive tsunami that hit Japan back in 2011. To this day, strange things are still being found washed up on shore from that powerful event. One of the weirdest things to be found was a dock that had washed ashore during a storm back in 2012. This happened at a beach in Newport, Oregon. And the dock did not contain just one creature, it actually had around 300 marine species, all of them attached to the dock. The object itself weighed around 188 tons, was completely coated in seaweed, and contained sea stars, barnacles, crabs, and mussels. After the dock was discovered, it was soon revealed that it actually came from a small city in Japan that was directly hit by the mega tsunami back in 2011. The dock had drifted through the Pacific Ocean for a full 15 months, gradually collecting all kinds of marine creatures before it eventually landed in Oregon. According to The Verge, this dock is only one of hundreds of different pieces of debris that have washed ashore all across Hawaii and the West Coast, ranging from Alaska to California. The 300 species attached to the dock are only some that have made it to the shores of the US after the tsunami. According to the US Fish and Wildlife Service, they estimate that the invasive species carried across the ocean and landing on the western shores cost the United States roughly $120 billion in damages every year. The freak fish. After the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, a lot of reports started coming in of all kinds of bizarre sea creatures washed up on shore. Literally dozens of photos appeared online of the most horrible creatures imaginable. However, some of these photos are a little less real than others. The problem was that after the tsunami, any weird or unusual photograph ended up being attributed to the natural disaster. Some of the fish, like the blobfish, a weird eel-squid hybrid, and even a fish that looks like a mutated platypus, were all blamed on the single tsunami. And in fact, the exact same set of creepy photos resurfaced after the next big tsunami in 2011. The sad truth is that most of these images don't have anything to do with any tsunami. They are definitely weird and horrendous sea creatures, and almost all of them really do exist, but don't believe everything you see on the internet. Porpoise and rice paddy. How would you like to be swimming in the ocean one moment and then dumped in the middle of a rice paddy the next? That's exactly what happened to one unfortunate sea creature back in 2011. A poor porpoise was not just washed up on shore, it was literally thrown into a rice paddy very far inland in Japan. This happened after the deadly tsunami in 2011, but thankfully rescuers very quickly found the baby porpoise and brought it back to the ocean where it belonged. If you're wondering exactly how far the sea creature was tossed, it was found over 1 mile from the shore a full week after the disaster. This is according to the local Japanese news source in Sendai. The porpoise was actually found by someone just passing by. They were shocked to see that the animal was actually okay. It was literally just splashing around in the water of the rice paddy. Luckily, it was only about 3 feet long and managed to survive the trip back to the ocean. A typical finless porpoise will grow to be around 5 feet long. These animals are native to most of coastal Asia. Sharknado. As if sharks and storms weren't scary enough already, now we have a real-life sharknado. This happened in New South Wales in Australia. After a brutal cyclone caused tremendous damage with its 120 miles per hour winds, a killer shark was found sitting on the beach completely displaced. Imagine if you had been standing on that beach when the giant shark was thrown through the air by the cyclone. You would literally have been a victim of a sharknado. The cyclone picked up the shark, threw it through the air, and it landed in the sand. But it could have definitely landed straight on someone's head. Luckily it didn't. The shark didn't actually survive the ordeal, which sucks for the poor guy, but good thing nobody was killed by the giant storm. Imagine if that shark had landed on someone's house or car. I just keep thinking about all the possibilities. Lost mermaid. Here is one that will give you nightmares. A man named Paul Jones posted a series of photographs from Norfolk Beach in the United Kingdom a while ago of what appeared to be a mermaid dead and rotten washed up on the shore. The creature in the photos had a very small tail and was definitely the ugliest mermaid you have ever seen in your life. It looked like a burn victim with a fin. People on social media were quick to point out the impossibility of the photographs. Remember, this was in 2016, before the Earth was flat. In any case, Paul Jones was likely the creator of the mermaid and was likely the one who put it there. It probably had nothing to do with a storm or a tsunami. Jones is actually a creator of models and has made a lot of fish-themed art pieces. But still, imagine finding that on your own during a nice romantic walk on the beach. You'd have a heart attack. Giant oarfish. Last on the list is the giant oarfish. The giant oarfish is the harbinger of death and destruction, supposedly a warning sign of an incoming earthquake and tsunami. In 2017, a massive oarfish washed up on shore in the Philippines, sparking panic and concern that there would be an earthquake in the coming days. Of course, this is not just paranoia. Giant oarfish are often found right before a big natural disaster. One was found in the Philippines on a beach in Agusan del Norte just days before a monstrous earthquake devastated the island in February of 2017, just weeks before this newest story. It's not only in the Philippines that they believe the legend of the oarfish either. The Japanese have long believed that oarfish are actually messengers from the sea god's palace warning people of imminent disaster. And there might actually be something to this legend. The thing is that oarfish live around 3,000 feet under the ocean and are one of the biggest fish in the entire world, but they very rarely make it to the surface. According to a report from Daily Mail, many scientists think that oarfish actually wash ashore because of the strong currents that precede earthquakes. And you know what happens when an earthquake strikes out at sea? A massive and destructive tsunami follows. Which of these sea creatures is the most disturbing? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching and see you again soon.